I'm not sure entirely about this, but I'm pretty sure in the 1900s, maybe 1800s, in England I think it was for the right to vote, they burned a lot of factories down. Do you think they were led by men to do that?
No, I think they were fighting for their rights.
By burning down factories?
The factories they were forced to work in for no money? Yeah.
You gotta rage when you're like trying to protest and stuff like that. You can't be nice.
Well, earlier you said that women in leadership roles don't commit violence.
I didn't say that.
I
said they're less likely to.
In a misogynistic world where everyone is violent, women are going to be violent inherently. They're going to become violent because of the societal, projection of everyone else.
What's your question? Just do you think women?
Well, earlier you said that women in leadership roles commit violence or don't commit violence, and I was just giving you an example of them committing violence.
I don't consider that as big of a violent act as what men in government have created. It's not a genocide. It's not some sort of giant war. It's them saying what we're going through is completely unfair. You're making us work in factories for $0. You're abusing us. You're sexually abusing us, and we're over it. And we want equal rights. A revolution is different than a war or a genocide. But I get your point.
Equal rights as in not having a job or?
No, as in women being respected as the same way as men. Women getting equal pay. Women getting equal hours. I mean, nowadays it's much different. We get very equal stuff somewhat, but back then it was so different.
Somewhat how?
How they got like dollars and dollars less than men, how they got different hours, how they got treated differently by the boss, how they got no respect in the workplace.
No, I mean somewhat how are we treated unequally now?
The wage gap is one example. Sexism is the workplace.
What?
Sexism in the workplace.
She said the wage gap.
I mean, the wage gap is one. That's still a thing. You can't deny that. It might have changed in some states. It might have been different, but it's still an issue.
There is no wage gap. This
but
has
women,
been completely,
that's what I was wondering.
Do you think that women work
completely debunked by economists?
But I do think men and women can get paid differently for the same job depending where that instance is taking place.
Thank you.
As in, there are men that are willing to do my job for free and would sign up and beg to do my job, and I charge money for what I do.
Well, really quick on the wage gap, but here, you wanted to go? Go ahead.
Do you think that women work as much as men?
Depends where you're asking. Depends who you're asking. It doesn't matter.
In a general basis. Do you think they work?
It doesn't
in like
matter.
the office?
Wait, hold on.
I think
Here, let's do this. Explain the wage gap.
If I applied for one job and a man applied for the same job, a boss is more likely to give a man, even if it's just 2 pennies more, a man is more likely to get my job than I am, because a boss who may or might not even be a woman, it's still no. Let's say I'm pregnant and I apply for a job. I probably will get rejected because I'm pregnant. But a man will get that job, even if his wife is pregnant.
Hold
on.
Because I'm going to take a leave of absence.
Yes.
And it's fair to say, listen, you're completely qualified for this job, but in 9 months you're going to give birth. I can't handle that. What if I get the job and I give birth 2 years later?
I would say that when the first hiring process, new hires, they'll want someone that will work for a longer period of time at first.
You think that's fair?
Yeah. I think that's totally fair.
Wait, hold on. Aren't you making an advocation that women should occupy a majority of positions of political power? So wouldn't it actually be within your logical framework actually okay for discrimination? You're just okay with discrimination towards men, but discrimination towards women is not okay.
I'm not saying that men shouldn't be allowed to be in a political space.
Aren't you a female supremacist?
No.
Hold on. You said you're a misandrist.
Misandrist, different than a female supremacist.
The way you explained it earlier...
No, listen. A female supremacist would say men should not be allowed.
I don't think they
I'm
would necessarily say that.
That's what I believe.
I think a male supremacist would say like, oh, well, women could do these sorts of jobs and, but they wouldn't just outright perhaps ban women from the workforce.
A male supremacist would say women should not be allowed in the political spectrum. And I would say...
well, we're talking about something different now. You're talking about the political spectrum. We were talking about the workforce.
I thought you were talking about political.
By the way, just to be clear, I'm not making an advocacy. I'm not making an advocacy for some supremacy one way or the other. I'm saying this is probably what they would say, but I'm a little confused because you were making an advocation towards, you're saying women are better at XYZ, ergo they should have an overabundance of representation in politics and the workforce.
I never said that.
Okay, tell me what you did say then.
I personally believe, and I don't speak for everyone in the U.S., I personally believe in a perfect world, women would have a little bit more power. Even if they,
hold on.
Even if they were just
that's not what you said.
Oh, I said women are better.
Okay, women are better.
And I believe that.
And so,
but I can't enforce that on everyone, and I'm a positive of that.
Wait, what do you mean you can't enforce it?
I can't tell everyone in the entire U.S. women are better, and if you don't vote for only women, I'm going to kill you. I can't say that. So I think...
you could say it.
But I can't. I think women deserve way more recognition in not only the political workspace, but in like everything workspace, environmental, political, everything workspace. Women should get a little bit more, because right now it is mainly men known for being.
Hold on, we're all over the place here. So I want to bring it back to Charlie Kirk, but first, really quick, to get through the wage gap. So you were saying. So I'm going to put aside the comments about, you're saying that there's inequality when it comes to hiring practices. Let's assume both a man has the same job, a woman has the same job. When you're essentially making the argument that that woman gets paid, I've heard different numbers, 70 cents, 80 cents, whatever it is. Explain that component of it to me, where women make less.
Women get hired for less than men. Sometimes men are more likely to not settle for a smaller amount because women know that they can't get much better jobs in like a high corporate position. Men are much more likely to get a higher paying job than women, especially if they don't have kids yet. If they already have kids and they're not planning on getting pregnant again, they might get offered more of a salary. However, women who even have a little bit of a slight chance of getting pregnant, even if it's not said out loud, it is more likely for them to not get paid or offered as job.
I'm just curious on that note, but it's kind of diverging a little bit from the wage gap conversation. If you were running a business, would you hire a woman who was like 7 months pregnant?
I mean, usually women who are 7 months pregnant aren't applying for a job, but it depends on her.
But you would make the
ideals.
argument, and you made the claim earlier, that it would be unfair for a company to not want to hire a woman who's 7 months pregnant. I know you're saying that most 7-month women who are pregnant at 7 months, they on their own don't want to get a job, but let's assume she is trying to get a job. Okay. So if you're running a business and say you're a startup and you have like limited resources, would you hire like a woman who's 7 months pregnant?
Depends how qualified she is. That's what
Let's
I would
say she's
look
qualified.
At. Fully more than the
she's
man
super
who's
qualified,
gonna apply.
but you know that within 2 months she's going to go ahead and take her maternity leave, and you're starting up your business, and the success of your business and your own capital is on the line. And if your business fails, you go out, you lose your own money, your own investment. Would you hire that woman?
Well, you can ask her multiple questions. There's multiple women who only get 1 day of maternity leave and have to go right back to work because if they're new hires, they have to go right back to work. That's the law.
I'm pretty sure it's exceptionally rare for pregnant women to take off 1 day.
No, there are some companies that if you are a new hire, you're not allowed maternity leave. And you can state that. You can say, I know you want a job, and I know you're super qualified.
Answer my question,
However, I'm not allowed to offer you maternity leave.
Would you hire?
And it depends on if they say yes or no.
I agree that there are some women who are like, they give birth, literally the placenta is still attached, and she fucking runs to work in her boss babe.
When they give birth.
Well, no, I mean it's the what's it called? The umbilical cord is literally hanging out of her vagina, and she runs to work.
You think that happens?
Probably. She runs to work in her boss babe heels, and she's like, "Feminism, I'm ready to work." Now, putting that aside, do you want to answer my question? If you were running a business, would you hire that woman?
It depends on what she's willing to do.
She wants to take maternity leave.
6 months, 6 weeks, what?
What's the typical?
I think it's 6 weeks.
6 weeks?
Yeah.
Sure, she wants to take 6 weeks.
Yeah, I'll hire you.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're going to hire this critical position,
If she's
and your
more-
business is at stake.
Yeah, if she is more qualified than her male counterparts that have applied for this position, if she's the most qualified person for this position, and she says, I will be able to come back to work and do really well, then why not?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and grant, for the sake of this conversation, that she's much more qualified than the men.
Okay,
but
then yeah.
she's still leaving you with 6, 7, 8 weeks where she won't be working for you.
She'll take it for the team.
How? I don't understand how
Just
that
work
would.
a little harder during that time and let the woman
She
rest.
wouldn't be working at all.
No, I'm saying that
It just-
her.
So the other
It de-
employees
no,
have
no,
to
no, no.
pick up the
That's
slack.
not what I'm saying.
That's what she's saying.
It depends on the situation completely, but companies purposefully not hiring pregnant or suspected to be pregnant women is a big issue. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're taking time off. Everyone takes time off. Everyone's eventually going to take time off.
Yeah, sure. Let me ask you a question. A woman-owned business, would you be fine with them not wanting to hire men because they're men?
No.
You'd be okay with that?
No, I would not.
What if they
Everyone
had- what
should
if-
be hired no matter what.
On their credentials.
But let me ask you this. So, like,
Their credentials. If a man is more qualified than a woman, hire the man.
okay, so just to be clear, you don't think that, like, a woman who's running a company and she wants to predominantly hire women and not hire men, you would be against that? You would say, no, you have to hire men?
Yeah.
Okay. What if the woman had, like, she had negative experiences with men and she doesn't want to hire men because of that?
That's emotional.
I don't think that's something that is, I mean, if that has happened, I don't think that's correct.
I mean, wouldn't you make the argument that a lot of women have had negative experiences with men?
Yeah, but
As in being
it's-
sexually assaulted
you
in the
know,
workplace?
like
or-
I'll say-
Sure, it could
like
be
I'll
violent. It
say-
could be violence. It could be SA.
I mean, as a business owner, and I am a woman business owner, hiring a male in a forward-facing position would not be good for my business. I specialize in photography for married women
Okay.
who are creating private art for their husbands. So I have had a male photo editor at one point, but he was into men. He wasn't the kind of guy who's going to jerk off to the ladies' pictures. So in some positions, men are not fit for the job, even though they would beg to do it because they want to see inside the doors of what happens behind the boudoir
That's
studio.
a great point. I mean, most businesses who aren't dealing with women's naked photos, I think it doesn't matter the gender, and I think discriminating against anyone is not correct. However, if you're a boudoir photo editor or someone who specializes in filming or editing naked women, it makes sense for a company to say, I only want women.
Why?
Because the customer, who's the most important part of the business, might say, I don't want a man looking at these photos.
But in the adult industry, it's mostly men holding the camera and doing the editing, which is why the perspective that most porn is shot from is the male gaze.
Yeah, but like you said, your company does photos of married women who want to take photos for their husbands.
Correct.
If those women say specifically, I'm paying for this service
And
and
I
I
only
don't
want a woman
want
to
a
see my
man
photos.
editing or looking at these photos, I think
that's
it's
their
totally
prerogative.
valid to only hire women. However, in a normal, like,
Wait, hold on. Sorry, we got a
Gone
chat
but
coming
not
through.
forgotten donated 200.
Sorry for the delay on this, man. Sorry.
You realize the USA is regarded as the greatest country to exist since the Roman Empire. Built on the backs of men. Name one thing women are better at that both genders can do, with evidence.
What do you think about, like, childcare?
it depends on the couple, but
No, like a childcare company, and they
like a
discriminate.
childcare company.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think of an example, like daycare. Would you be okay with them discriminating against like having male daycare employees?
No.
They discriminate based on criminal record and if you're in the adult industry, as in they don't think adult industry people should be babysitting kids at a daycare, or if you have a violent criminal record, you have no place in a daycare. But their sex or gender of daycare people is irrelevant.
Yeah, men should not, I'm not saying men should be discriminated against for different positions. I'm just saying, like, look at everyone. And a lot of companies are, because of the way that the world has been set up, a lot of companies are controlled by men. And so slowly but surely, the line goes down and women are more and more discriminated against in the workplace because of the way that those companies have started. I'm not trying to say that, like, in the 1800s when these companies were started, like Wells Fargo or whatever, that it makes sense for I'm like not saying that it's bad that a man runs that company. I'm saying that it's bad if that man has a history of discriminating.
But okay, I'd still like to get an answer on this. The wage gap. Explain precisely what the wage gap is.
That women get paid less than men for the same job in a lot of different companies.
I also think women are afraid to ask for more money, and there's a lot of women are afraid to ask for more money, and they have a lot of like issues with that. And men are not afraid of that. Men will ask, "Hey, I need this, and that." And woman is very much not like that, so the men take advantage of that also.
But so what I'm asking though is when we're looking at the wage gap, when you hear these numbers, what specifically is it looking at?
What do you mean?
So are you comparing all the money that women make in the country versus all the money that the men make in the country?
No, I'm not looking at that.
So what specifically are you saying it's controlled?
No. I'm saying in a lot of different jobs, might not be this one, it might not be other jobs in LA specifically, but in a lot of jobs, if I applied for a job and a male counterpart of mine applied for a job, a male would be offered more money or given more money for a very similar job because he's a man. And even if you haven't seen that your very self in this industry that you work in, it is still a thing in a lot of industries.
Well, my industry that I work in, I can talk broadly about the entertainment industry. You live in Los Angeles, for example. There's been actually hiring practices where they're actually excluding the hiring of white people and white men specifically, and men specifically. There's massive amounts of affirmative action in the entertainment industry. So this idea that there's and it's not just affirmative action in the entertainment industry. We see this in all industries. Women predominate in HR, and women are overwhelmingly the one who are making hiring decisions at these companies. I guess what I'm trying to get to with the wage gap is, so the wage gap doesn't, the one that's often cited, 72 cents, 82 cents, 84 cents, who knows, it's always changing, is it's looking at the full-time earnings of all women and comparing it to the full-time earnings of all men. It doesn't account for hours worked, it doesn't account for overtime, it doesn't account for commute time, it doesn't account for hazard pay, it doesn't account for the type of job, it doesn't account for a dozen different metrics. It's just simply comparing the money that women make to the money that men make. And so if it was the case that men work more, for example, which they do, men work more hours than women, you start to see it shrink. And then if you start looking at specific industries and you compare like for like, it shrinks more. You'd agree with me that men and women pursue different things when it comes to college education, academia, and career.
But do you know why?
Choice.
No.
Yes, it's absolutely choice. Women have any choice that they can pursue.
Yes.
You have a tax attorney, a corporate attorney on the panel.
Okay.
She's not relegated to being a secretary.
I'm not saying that.
And she's also an immigrant too. She's an immigrant and a woman and would you consider her a person of color?
Yeah, that's why I would agree that it's really your personal pursuit whether you want to stick with your dream. And I don't personally think there's a significant wage gap. I can only speak to my own industry, that I have compared salaries with my colleagues. Of course, we all, no matter men or women, we all started pretty much similar salary. I think the only wage gap that could happen later on was because of course, women, they have childbearing responsibility, they have child care responsibilities, because usually, I have to say, the women have to make more sacrifices in the early stage after the child is born. So they have to take a lot more time off to take care of the child, and maybe have to make difficult career decisions to step back from promotion opportunities. But I think from the starting point, I think we are pretty equal in terms of my industry.
However, would you agree that more women, since birth, are pushed to being things that make less money than men?
I think that's more a personal choice. Some women, they may choose to step back and take a more, to have more work-life balance to take care of their family. So that's why they will go into HR and secretary jobs. And of course, women who choose to be more ambitious and career-oriented, they may take on some more difficult jobs, like becoming a doctor or lawyer or some other
Can I ask,
leadership positions.
Have you only lived in Los Angeles?
I have actually lived in China, in Canada, and Europe, and US.
Okay, so lots of liberal areas.
I wouldn't say so because
Canada, Europe,
I wouldn't say
LA.
China. I mean, I mean, American government
not
has
China,
been
but you
always
moved
saying
here
there's
for
so
a
much
reason.
propaganda like going on in China. So I wouldn't say China is like liberal. And actually, a
Yes.
lot of Americans think China is very behind on liberal
Yes,
issues.
of course.
So
But I mean, in like the States and like whatever, have you only lived in LA and where'd you say?
LA and DC. But I don't think your political opinions or your personal values are affected by like where you're geographically located.
Well, I know plenty of people who grew up in like more conservative areas, smaller towns, southern towns, who would say that since birth they have been pushed towards more idealistic feminism gender roles where like they were told to be more girly and to not apply themselves to more male
As
jobs.
in, like the parents who tell their daughters just to go to college so they can find a husband.
Exactly.
As in, so my mother's father, who was a World War II that was in the Navy, he sent all of his daughters to college so they could go find husbands. Now, that is still a thing. There's also generational, like I'm from a town where there's women who are generationally having babies to live off of welfare. And that is something that was like their mother raised them that way, and they think that they just need to get knocked up. They don't need to be with the man, so they get the government benefits. There are problems with the United States. So I think sometimes immigrants have a better attitude coming into the U.S., and they honestly feel like the world is their oyster, whereas when you're born, whether I think your economic or financial situation makes a big difference
Totally.
on the type of opportunities or fair wages that you get. I think a lot of women barely graduate high school, already have kids. There was a daycare in the high school in the city that I went to.
Yeah.
I mean, those women never got to figure out who they were or wanted to be, but they're already mothers of two, and they're dealing with that. Now they're 35 messaging me on Facebook saying, your life looks like so much fun. Because I am single, haven't had kids, no divorces. On paper, I'm like total wifey material.
Something people say to me is like, it's not fair that you're talking about these issues when you don't have these issues. I'm very lucky to be, I grew up in Los Angeles, California, very liberal. I grew up with very liberal parents. I'm not poor. I have a good life. I went to a good liberal high school and I go to a college. You know, I have so many wonderful rights. But when you look at the entire United States, if you look at the poor little states, poor little cities in Alabama, South Carolina, like all
You're
those
naming
places,
red states.
red states. If you
blue
look
states
at
there's the same thing
if you
happening.
look at the small cities in little states that have issues,
I grew up very close to the Amish country.
Yeah.
Virginville, Blue Ball, Intercourse, Pennsylvania. Those,
even Pennsylvania, Amish country.
there is all sorts of things happening, and men who are told they have to marry a woman, and there's a lot of arranged marriage, but these guys are actually on Grindr.
Exactly.
You know, I drove through the town with my friend who prefers men, and he got on the app, and he couldn't believe all these hot farmer boys that are popping up.
I'm sorry, what does this have to
app.
do with the wage gap? But so back to this.
It
Just
depends
saying
where
that
you are
it
and how you
depends
grew
where
up.
you are, and it depends how you're raised with the wage gap. But like,
Because you're certainly not talking about entry-level positions. Like a Domino's Pizza hires people at minimum wage, no matter if you're a lady or a man.
or like
So
in
you're
Los
talking
Angeles,
about-
the wage gap is way less likely to be found.
Well, actually, in major cities, if you look at single childless women between the ages of 18 to 29 in most like metro city areas, they actually out-earn men. So
Good for them.
Again, but I guess when it comes to the wage gap, there is an earnings gap. So the earnings gap is you're not looking at factors like hours worked, you're not looking at job, you're just literally comparing the money that men make and the money that women make. There's an earnings gap. The question you need to ask yourself is
Well,
not whether it exists, but why it exists. You would probably say it's due to sexism and patriarchy and misogyny and all this stuff. I don't think it has anything to do with sexism, really.
So what does it have to
Well,
do
you know
with?
what? I'll actually make the argument it does have to do with sexism. It has to do with women's sexism.
Such as?
Sure, I'll give you a couple examples. Would you say that people who are motivated are more likely to earn more money?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you say that people who have a desire for status are more likely to earn more money?
Yeah.
When it comes to dating, it is a dating podcast after all.
Right.
I don't know if your own preferences are going to align with this. Would you say that men or women are more likely to prefer a high earning partner?
know.
You don't know?
No.
Okay, what about status? Do you think men or women have a preference for status in a partner?
I don't know. You know, I
You don't
think
know?
men prefer women of lower status so that they can be more dominating in their relationship. Men often fear women who have more status or more money.
I would dispute that, but I'll go
It really
ahead.
depends
For
on
the
the
sake of
marriage.
conversation, for the sake of argument, I'll go ahead and grant that. Is that your actual worldview?
I would say because of, and not because of my views or because of their views, because of the way that the U.S. has been shaped with men being on top. Not a bad thing. It just happened that way because of the way that we evolved or whatever.
When you say evolved, what do you mean? Are you saying there's like natural evolutionary
Because
reasons
men
for?
were, so if we go all the way back to like the start of
Let's go
evolution,
back. Sure.
women were known to stay more at the home or the little hut or whatever
The
to
hut.
take care
The
of
cave.
Right, to take care of the children and
Yeah.
the crops and the society.
And one question.
And men
one
were,
question,
wait,
really
wait,
quick.
Wait, wait, wait.
One question. Wait. I swear I'll let you finish. I just got one quick question. Back in the hut days, the cave days.
Yeah.
Were there air-conditioned office jobs?
No.
Okay. Go ahead. Continue.
Women were more likely to stay home because they were more valuable. Men can impregnate multiple women. Women can't be pregnant with multiple
Wait,
people at once.
you're saying
so men were chosen.
women were more valuable back in
men
the
men were chosen to go out and hunt because if one of them dies in the hunt, it's not as irreparable damage as if a woman died.
Wait, so women, even historically speaking,
Yes.
were more valued than men?
Yes.
Wouldn't that totally
Babe,
contradict
Can I just say
No.
one thing?
everything you've been saying so far?
Because slowly, as men realized that they could leverage the fact that they went out and quote unquote provided.
Can I just say one thing? There would be no men without women. So like we birthed
Okay, there would be no
Okay,
women
but-
without men.
but-
There would be no
I don't
food
understand
source
I
without
don't
men.
understand
Okay,
in the
but,
cave
but,
days.
but well, women could
forage.
technically go hunt, but men would say,
But women
I'm-
needed the protein.
Hold on.
men would say, we're gonna go hunt because if 3 out of 10 men die, it's way better for the society.
And is that
than
your
if-
view?
No, that's the
Are you
truth.
saying men are disposable? Just curious.
No.
Well, you just said it's better if men die.
In the olden days, when there was no anything that was happening and it was just like caves and animals and fire, yes.
Society's
Wait,
trying
so
to
just to be clear-
build a
It
population.
made
Wait,
more sense for men to go hunt.
Sure.
If one man died, you could still keep the society
it.
alive.